Shalom, my name is Tirza Lewis with Direct Akkad, the Israeli Beit Midrash. This is Niddah Pt3, and today we will be talking about the Mikveh. First, I would like to recommend women who are watching this series, if you haven't seen Niddah Part 1 or Part 2, to go back and to see, first watch Niddah Part 1 and then watch Niddah Part 2 before watching this video. Because there are, we really lay a foundation in those two videos in order to build from for this one. So in reference to the Mikveh, perhaps the most recognized tradition for observing Niddah is ritual immersion, or as we Hebrews call it, the Mikveh. Indeed, even to this day, women end their cycles and periods of blood impurity with a dunk in water. And the question comes, where did this tradition come from? And did ancient Israel recognize it? First, the Torah doesn't require a mikveh to cleanse Niddah. And we looked at this in Part 2 in depth. For normal menstruation, the only thing that is required to be clean again, according to the Torah, is time. If the bleeding has stopped, then on the 8th day, you are clean. And for Niddah, outside of the regular menstrual cycle, time and a sin and burnt offering are the requirements. The Torah does not mention washing of any kind in relation to Niddah. Not even for a man who accidentally becomes Niddah, the only requirement for him would be time as well. The Hebrew word mikveh is used in the Tanakh, and it means a pool of water. It doesn't mean the act of immersing oneself, even though today when we speak about the mikveh, we're speaking about a pool of water that would be used for ritual immersion. In Leviticus 15, we read that people who are unclean because of seminal emission, if it's a husband and a wife who's had relations, they would be the zav and the zava. And we've spoken about those terms, or one who touches an object that a Niddah woman sits on or lies on, that they must wash themselves and their clothes in order to be clean. And so we could see this in Leviticus chapter 15. The word that's used for wash in reference to washing oneself in Leviticus 15 is the Hebrew word rachatz. And that word rachatz means simply to bathe or to wash oneself in water. So it doesn't really have a connotation of totally, dunking yourself in water. In ancient times, it's thought that people would go to a stream and wash, or have someone bring a bucket of water and kind of pour it over them in order to bathe themselves. The practice of immersing in water after Niddah is really, it's practiced and it's regarded as historical by most Torah observant groups and most Torah observant people. So some women will fill up tubs with water, and one of the things about a mikveh is that we like it to be running water. So she'll either leave the spout running or open up the drain, to produce water that's flowing, and then dunk herself in the water, in the bathtub water for immersion. Other women will just take a shower, allowing the water to pour over them. And other women who have swimming pools or different types of pools that they might have at their house, they'll use, like a jacuzzi or something. They'll use that pool or that water to dunk themselves in after Niddah. Jewish women who live in communities, they actually have access to mikveh pools where they can go and they can immerse in a pool of running water. But when we look at the scriptures, Again, we looked at the Torah on Niddah, and it's not in the Torah of Niddah. So when we look at the scriptures, we're kind of hard pressed to find an explicit example of a woman who is coming out of Niddah, immersing herself in water. But there is one example that may give us a glimpse of the process just prior to the first temple. 2 Samuel chapter 11, verses 2 through 4. And it came to pass in an evening tide that David arose from off his bed and walked upon the roof of the king's house. And from the roof he saw a woman washing, this is the Hebrew word rachatz, herself. And the woman was very beautiful to look upon. And David sent and inquired after the woman. And one said, Is this not Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? And David sent messengers and took her. And she came in unto him, and he lay with her, for she was purified from her uncleanness. And she returned unto her house. Looking at these verses, one would think that Bathsheba was in the act of washing herself to cleanse herself from her uncleanness, her Niddah uncleanness. If her husband was away, which he was, then her uncleanness would have likely been from Niddah. When we look at the scriptures version, or the ISR version of the Bible, it translates 2 Samuel 11, verse 4 as, And David sent messengers to fetch her, and she came to him, and he lay with her, for she was cleansing herself from her uncleanness, and she returned to her house. So we can see from the ISR, or the scriptures version, that this further expresses the idea that she was performing her ritual purification from Niddah. The New American Standard Bible, however, makes it seem like she purified herself after having relations with David. The New American Standard says, David sent messengers and took her, and when she came to him, he lay with her. And when she had purified herself from her uncleanness, she returned to her house. I believe that the meaning of this verse stands, even in the New American Standard, if you put parentheses around, and she had purified herself from her uncleanness. Virtually all translations that I have read assume that the reason she was bathing herself, or assume that the bathing referred to in this verse, first of all, happened before she came to David's house. And also that she was purifying herself from Niddah and not from having sex with David, King David. Although an immersion or a chatz or a bath or a washing would definitely be necessary for that uncleanness as well. The one concern with the interpretation that Bathsheba was purifying herself from Niddah is that the encounter with King David on day 8 of her cycle resulted in conception. The 8th day of a woman's cycle is not normally a fertile time in a woman's cycle to conceive. However, it's not an impossibility. It can happen, but it's not a common thing that a woman would conceive on day 8. So we can glean a few things from the Bathsheba account. The first thing we can glean is that the mikveh after Niddah is performed naked. Bathsheba was naked. And so this is still the way that women immerse after Niddah. When they immerse themselves in their tub or in their shower or whatever, they don't do that clothed normally. Normally they do that naked. And even a Jewish woman, when she goes to the mikveh in her neighborhood, they do it. They dunk themselves naked. The second thing we can glean from this is that the mikveh was performed at the evening time, or at the beginning of the 8th day. And so we can see that it was performed, the 7th day had already, it was in that mixture, the 7th day going into the 8th day, in that evening time, that Erev time. The third thing that we can see from Bathsheba's account is that the mikveh was performed even though the woman had no intention of being intimate with her husband, because Uriah was away at war. So we can see from this that any woman with a husband or with no husband would do this. The fourth thing that we can glean from Bathsheba's account is that the woman was considered ready for intimacy immediately after her mikveh. So immediate, right? Because David literally called for her to come right after her mikveh. So immersion after Niddah, it appears in many first century documents and commentaries. So Rabbi Akiva, he was alive 50 to 135 CE, and he was part of the Babylonian Talmud. Well, his writings was part of that, or his statements was part of that, states that a woman shall remain in her menstrual impurity until she immerses in water. So we can see from the first century that this was something that that they practiced and that they thought. And we know that there are many mikveh pools actually that are still even existent to this day from the first century. However, prior to the Second Temple, it's thought that many women used rivers or streams to immerse themselves. So when we look at the custom of washing chats or immersion, we can understand that today, presently, we as women hygienically, we wash every day in our society. Most women wash themselves after their cycles are over, either because they wash every day or, out of habit. But does this act of washing in a shower or a bath, or taking it a step further and completely dunking oneself in water, purify Niddah, purify a woman from Niddah? According to the Torah, I would have to say no. I would have to say, according to the Torah, only time for regular Niddah is required. However, as a custom or as a tradition, it may have sentimental and even spiritual value to fully immerse. It may simply be an outward sign or a ceremony of the transformation that's taking place in a woman's body. Again, we talked about these acts of transformation and how important these events are in our lives. Again, my name is Tirza Lewis with the Leviticus Israeli Beit Midrash. If you have any questions or comments on this lesson, you could put them in the comments section. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Shalom.